Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 572: The Impact of Thoughtlessness and Rejection, Part 2. How Insanity and Dishonesty Defeat Honesty in Your Heart. The podcast objectives are restate how and why many are beyond spiritual recovery, analyze the first battle in the Second Great War over your heart, analyze the force the enemy is aiming at your heart, and analyze the impact of insanity within your heart. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcasts or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us. For these are troubling times, and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below, and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. What is happening behind the scenes? Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 570 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we analyzed the prime objective of the Second Great War over your heart. That is, the infiltration of thoughtlessness and rejection. This is crucial for if you fail to guard your heart from thoughtlessness and rejection, the enemy will gain complete control over your will. Ergo, you will now become a servant of Satan and one of many fatalities of the wicked one. Now, as I say, these podcasts related to the progression of death are purely educational. Remember, anyone who descends to these spiritual planes has no hope for recovery. As the saying goes, they've gone too far. And thus, my remit is to show you just how far they've gone. To A, discourage you from taking the first step on this dreaded path. And B, to empower you to see through the false Hebrews who have transformed themselves into servants of Satan. My dear friends, we have seen many men and women operate in thoughtlessness and rejection for many years. However, many of us don't appreciate what is happening behind the scenes vis-a-vis the spiritual strongholds that are being forged. To wit, strongholds that have locked down their minds so hard that they will never believe or follow Yahuwah's will. And strongholds that have their hearts so locked up that they will never choose nor submit to his will. Emphasis on the word never. Now, we have already analyzed the spiritual lockdown of your mind, and those were some of the sadder lessons I have ever taught. And thus, I must caution you the fate of your heart in the progression of death is sadder still. And yet, we must analyze this fate with great courage and commitment, for this is the fate awaiting all who are deceived concerning Yahuwah's will. Let's get started. The foundation for manipulation. Now, as you have learned, the second great war over your mind was lost when complacency teamed up with disregard, who then teamed up with despair, who then went to war with hope, i.e., the foundation of your faith in Elohim. Now, if you recall, this was the only way despair could defeat hope in spiritual warfare. Vis-a-vis, she had to create an uneven playing field, and she did. This set off a chain reaction of death that eliminated every degree of obedience and faith within your mind. That said, it should be clear that thoughtlessness and rejection will follow the same playbook in your heart because it worked in your mind. Ergo, we are about to witness the resurrection of all the degrees of prejudice and contempt, which will be much worse this time around, seeing as you are now spiritually blind. Now, as you would expect, the first battle you will fight at this juncture will involve insanity, for it is the first degree in the progression. You can see this by observing the table below. To wit, insanity is the fundamental degree of thoughtlessness. And as the first degree and the progression, it is aligned with manipulation. Now, that said, the question we should chiefly entertain is this: what degree of prejudice or contempt is insanity designed to reinstate in your heart? The answer is sure, and I'll give you a hint. It is the first degree and the progression of prejudice and contempt. Now, if you answered dishonesty, you're right. Dishonesty is the first degree in the progression of prejudice and contempt. Well done. Now, if you recall, I had many things to say about dishonesty, and trust me, none of it was good. Why? It's because dishonesty lays the foundation for manipulation. And if you don't recall why this is such a huge issue, allow me to remind you with the following revelation. Get this: manipulation has a reciprocal nature. Ergo, whenever you look to manipulate a situation or someone else, you will find that the only one you are manipulating is you. Ergo, the same rule applies to dishonesty, for it is the first degree in the progression of manipulation. No doubt, this will make things extremely difficult, for dishonesty encourages the adoption of a false reality, and she does so in a very subtle but powerful way. And yet, despite all her wares and trappings, honesty beat her to the point where there was nothing left to say. Notwithstanding, dishonesty has a new partner in crime, an unfair advantage she did not have before. And it is this new player who will be the key that empowers her to win this war. Enter insanity. Let's talk about it and what all this fighting is for. A tidal wave aimed at your heart. Now, first things first, we need an updated table that shows the joint progressions of contempt, prejudice, thoughtlessness, and rejection. And voila, joint table activated. As you can see below, feel free to take a few moments to review and pause the video. Now, as you have likely gathered, the progression of thoughtlessness is aligned with the progression of contempt. And this makes perfect sense, for you will never consider the will of any authority figure if you are already in contempt of their will. Facts. Now, we will complete this table as we continue this series. But for today's podcast, we know everything we need to know. To wit, insanity has teamed up with dishonesty to kick off the second great war over your heart. Now, that said, the first thing we should do is revisit the impact of dishonesty in your heart, a matter we discussed in End Times 4:14, How Contempt Plagues the Heart, Part 4, which was posted on February 7th, 2025. No doubt you should invest the time to engage that podcast, even if you did so last year, for we only have enough time to hit a few of the high points from that lesson. And we should begin with the impact of dishonesty in your heart. Now, you can see this impact by observing the image to the right. And you can also see how dishonesty is now being driven by insanity. Now, even though this does not change the impact of dishonesty in your heart, it does make it stronger. This is key due to the current state of your heart. Remember, your heart at this juncture is filled with virtue and the fear of Elohim. Ergo, it will take a great deal of maneuvering and manipulation for dishonesty to be reinstated. And yet, she does have a path. And as with every enemy you will face in your quest, if there is a path to defeat you, the enemy is going to take it. Along these lines, your heart has already been compromised because it is no longer being fed informed thoughts from your mind. Ergo, your heart is being forced to rely on its own subconscious and summary, which will only last for so long. Next, and most importantly, dishonesty is not only in league with insanity. Look here. She is also in league with all the degrees of doubt, disobedience, ignorance, and deception which are controlling your mind. My dear friends, there is a reason why the Ruach has led me to partition this quest into phases. In effect, there is a reason why I have labeled the 16 deadliest degrees of lawlessness as the progression of death. It's because they are all connected. That's why it's called a progression. To wit, one degree of death leads to another, and the full force of all the degrees that have been unlocked give their collective strength to unlock all the others. Ergo, by the time you reach this battle, you will be subjected to the full force of all the degrees of deception and ignorance. And let me tell you something. This is not some random ocean current. This, my friends, is a tidal wave aimed at your heart. The only one who truly suffers. Now, as you would expect, the full effect of this spiritual force will annihilate the ruach of honesty within you. This is a key matter you must understand concerning spiritual warfare, and thus I will offer it to you as a revelation. This is one I advise you to bookmark and to share. The ruach of Elohim cannot be defeated. Ergo, when you lose any spiritual battle, it is because your ruach cannot withstand the forces that have risen against you. Now, this speaks to the operation of the ruach within our lives. If you recall, the ruach, amongst other things, is a collection of 64 unique powers and gifts, all of which are planted within our souls via the implanted word of Elohim. Now, what happens next is marvelous and often misunderstood by the vast majority of so-called believers. To wit, the Ruach of Elohim fortifies the Ruach within you with these 64 gifts to ensure that no weapon formed against you will prosper. Now, this is why his spirit must reside within us. It is because his spirit is transforming our spirit one degree of perfection and power at a time. And this, my friends, is how we succeed in spiritual warfare in our hearts and in our minds. Now, as simple and as powerful as this arrangement is, it can be subverted. To wit, in those scenarios where we attempt to curtail and or suspend the transformation process, i.e., the process by which we are empowered to succeed in spiritual warfare. Now, it is true that men and women take these actions at every level of their quest. But it should be quite clear that these actions are taken most often during your war with dishonesty and insanity, which makes sense if you reconsider a definition of insanity. Once more, please. By definition, insanity is a severe disorder of the mind and the heart depicted by extreme agitation to the point where one cannot think clearly. Something utterly foolish or irrational, a dangerous action or situation that is void of reason. Now, the key phrase in this definition reveals that insanity is a severe disorder of the heart where one cannot think clearly. That's the key, my friends. To wit, the reason why men and women at this level fail to succeed in spiritual warfare. As I say, it would take extreme measures of insanity to cause a man who has consistently won in spiritual warfare to follow a path where he will consistently lose. Likewise, it would take extreme measures of insanity to cause a man who has overcome sin to go back into sin. Not only this, but it would also take extreme measures of deception. And as it pertains to the heart, insanity is where deception starts. To wit, he is determined to create a cordial environment where you cannot think clearly. And if you think he can't do it, let me tell you something. He already did. My dear friend, he has already created a mess in your mind, and your mind is feeding that mess into your heart. And the first dish he is serving is insanity. Now, this is crucial for the makeup of your heart is much different than the makeup of your mind. Along these lines, your heart embraces truth in a much more passionate and meaningful way than your mind, for that is how it was made. To wit, there is a personal element to the things you believe with all your heart. Ergo, you will hold on to them harder, longer, farther, and stronger than anything you could ever believe in your mind. Facts. Now, the enemy knows this. Ergo, the assault against the truth in your heart must be even more passionate than your commitment to maintaining the truth in your heart. Ergo, the violence against the truth in your heart will be the greatest violence you will ever know. Along these lines, insanity pushes dishonesty to build off the questioning that was initiated in your mind to push her agenda of manipulation. And as you are being manipulated, insanity will subject your heart to extreme levels of agitation. My dear friends, you can see this by observing the image to the right. To wit, the first stop on their conquest is your physical thought alignment center. This is devastating, for your alignment center determines the thoughts which will permeate your heart. And prior to now, it was shielding you from the deception in your mind. And thus, it is the only thing keeping your heart from being conquered by the same force of ignorance and deception that has already conquered your mind. It is your last line of defense. Ergo, the remit of insanity is as sane as it is simple, i.e., obliterate your last line of defense. In doing so, the ignorance and deception within your mind will have a clear path into your heart. Once there, they will create a cloud around this faculty so that the chaos that is, ironically, within your mind can enter your heart. Now, the downfall of your alignment center sets off a chain reaction that corrupts your DPU, your impressions, and your feelings, which are being corrupted by your emotions and your character. And if I had the time, I would love to analyze this at a more detailed level. But time is of the essence, my friends, and you know this. And so I encourage you to take my advice and listen to End Times 4:14, How Contempt Plagues the Heart, Part 4, which was posted on February 7th, 2025. In doing so, you will acquaint yourself with the impact of dishonesty in your heart, which you will experience again on a more intimate and permanent level after the collapse of your physical thought alignment center, which is now being controlled by insanity and dishonesty. Trust me, this is a very lethal combination. Here is why. Insanity creates an environment where you cannot think clearly. This allows dishonesty to manipulate the truth in your heart so that it mirrors the thoughts of deception and ignorance within your mind. This sets the stage for you to believe in your heart the same lie you believe in your mind. Now, what happens next is as tragic as it is sure, and thus I will offer it to you as a revelation. This is one I advise you to bookmark and to share. Once dishonesty manipulates you into embracing the lie, Insanity will rip the truth out of your heart. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, this is one of the worst things that could ever happen to you for many reasons. But for the sake of time, I will only address one, which I will offer as another revelation. You will experience a measure of death the moment insanity rips the truth out of your heart. Not only this, but it will be one of the most traumatic experiences you ever have, even more traumatic than the wrangling of truth from your mind. We know this because your heart, unlike your mind, is very sensitive. Ergo, the pain you feel from this traumatic experience is very deep, and the emotional scars will never heal. Now, here lies a problem, a very big problem, vis a vis the fact that your heart will never heal from the trauma of insanity is evidence that the damage is, in fact, permanent, and thus any future confrontation with the truth will be too hard for you to bear. No doubt, this is why you will end up rejecting the truth once you reach the end of this progression. For once again, you cannot handle the truth. Not only this, but your mind is already filled with denial, and thus denial is being pushed into your heart. Ergo, you will deny the truth in your heart the same way you denied the truth in your mind. And although it is the most insane thing you could ever do, at this point, it is the only thing you can do. You, my friend, are out of options. For when you were in your right mind, you wouldn't take a clue. And so let this be a lesson to you and a warning. You are insane if you start back down the path of dishonesty. For the one thing you must know is true. If you choose to be dishonest with anyone, the only one who truly suffers is you. This is the impact of dishonesty and insanity. And yet, the damage of thoughtlessness is not finished. The damage of thoughtlessness is not done. Now, here is the final word. You will meet the greatest calamity if your heart is controlled by insanity. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, we have consistently analyzed the dangers of two poisons when taken together. And if you are still keeping your list, add insanity and dishonesty near the top. As I say, it was one thing when your lies were embers of penny vanity, and there was still a chance you could be saved. But when you pushed the envelope to the point of insanity, you had no idea you were digging your own grave. Heretofore, I recommend never underestimate the power of dishonesty, for those who regard her will all be slain. For a dishonest heart will be filled with sorrow, and the man who bears it will go down in pain. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 572. The Impact of Thoughtlessness and Rejection, Part 2. And the next podcast is entitled A Detailed Account of the Torah of Yahushua Messiah, Part 6. I will post this podcast on Friday, January 23rd, 2026. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim, continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.